so my first AD on this one film that I worked on used to call all the scenes of intimacy wo pucchi wala scene. This is a barrier. This is actually, for your knowledge, a strapless bra. हमारे पास काम नहीं है. Okay?
Lifestyle, entertainment, and everything in between. This is the Pinkvilla Podcast.
Aastha, welcome to Pinkvilla.
Thank you so much.
So you are India's first intimacy coordinator, right? So I want to approach this because it's a very new thing still for Indian audience to know and learn about and adapt to. So I'm going to go for the first 2-3 questions in the most academic way. So tell me, how do you define intimacy on set as an intimacy coordinator? What is intimacy for you?
Very good question. I usually get asked, the first question is, who is an intimacy coordinator? What is an intimacy coordinator? But what is intimacy? Well, intimacy is not an intimate scene always, but also is an intimacy. So for intimacy, what we usually define it as is, of course, there is simulated sex, there is nudity, there is any kind of making out. There's any kind of physical touch that can have a sexual connotation. There's also hypersexualization of body. So we would like to, for those situations, take into account situations like item songs, for instance. Right? It's very skimpy clothing, hypersexualization of body, close-ups of cleavages and bums and what have you.
Yeah.
Familial interaction between minors and adults, such as, giving you a very weird example, but it might work. Shah Rukh Khan is playing somebody's dad, but he's not actually that person's dad.
Yeah.
Right? So if he's, say, for instance, playing the dad to a 8-year-old girl, right? We have to make sure that we're taking care of that 8-year-old girl.
Absolutely.
Because although it is Shah Rukh Khan and although it is going to be an extremely safe environment and you would never in your wildest dreams imagine anything going wrong, but a child can for one turn around and say, "Mera mood nahi hai kuch karne ka. I don't feel like doing this." Right? More often than not, you will have parents who are there to chaperone their child, their guardian on set. What I often find with those people is that they have a vested interest in the child getting the job.
Yeah.
So they cannot interrupt that power dynamic.
Yeah.
They cannot be the person who you can say can uphold the child's consent.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
So you need that other extra person. An intimacy coordinator can fulfill that role. An intimacy coordinator also is equipped to deal with any kind of authenticity related consulting when it comes to LGBTQIA plus stories. So I would call that an intimacy scene if there is a power dynamic at play between a person from the community and a person who's, say, cishet.
Yeah.
For instance, there was this one particular scene that was shot in a show called The Fame Game, which is the one with
Madhuri,
Madhuri.
backed by Dharma.
Correct. There was a scene of the character who's playing Madhuri's son goes to a brothel.
Yes.
There is a lap dance, and then after that there is a little bit of a physical hatapai that happens between him and a transgender person. That would technically come under an intimacy coordinator's purview. There is abuse against somebody from a community. So the minute that there is that power dynamic at play, you want an intimacy coordinator on set. Because you want to never have people from the community, or in this case the community, but if it is caste related, if it is religion related, if it is any kind of minorities related, because of something called systemic oppression, you want to make sure that the gaze around it is not incorrect.
Correct.
And an intimacy coordinator can bring that information to the table as a consultant. So those are spaces where intimacy coordinators do work, they do function. So that is stuff that is outside of the purview of one's very narrow idea of what an intimacy coordinator does, which is make people have sex on set or like on screen.
You must have got that a lot.
I get that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is why I asked you this as a first question. Now, to understand your job as an intimacy coordinator, I need to understand what intimacy on set is. So that is why the first question. Now, as an intimacy coordinator, when you go on the set, how do you exactly get into the situation which is already has a director, which already has a producer, which maybe have equations between the director producer already. Now, to go between that and then establish the necessary rules that you're working on, how do you bring that into play?
Okay, so again, this is very interesting because it's so pertinent to our film industry specifically.
Yeah.
Because our film industry is a fraternity. Everybody knows everybody. Somebody's related to somebody. So your director knows your producer. They've worked on 4 films before. Sometimes the actors and the directors are great friends. They go out drinking together. They meet each other for dinners. They've been friends. They've been whatever. And they've been like, oh, chal, we'll do one film together. You know. And that's how a lot of casting happens. That's how a lot of films get
Most
made.
of the times.
For an intimacy coordinator to kind of come in here, it's it can be a little bit of a, I would say, not a very smooth terrain.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're interrupting a certain kind of power dynamic. But on the contrary, there is so much benefit to it because within that rapport that you share in your personal life with somebody, there are a lot of times that you cannot set forth boundaries.
Yeah.
So actors find it very hard to say no or yes or have a direct conversation, like a professionally appropriate direct conversation with their directors and their producers for those reasons. So for those reasons, intimacy coordinators actually are very beneficial to this situation because they interrupt that power dynamic. They absorb conversations on both ends. So I will listen to everything that the director is saying and whatever the director wants. More often than not, directors, producers, they know exactly what they want. They don't have the vocabulary to convey it.
Yeah.
You know, either without references. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll create references. Because visually, if they cannot articulate it with words because they're uncomfortable to do so, they will then find videos, different kinds of videos, make edits, come up with references of other films to show ki, oh, this is what I want you to do. They will not be able to say, I want you to thrust.
Yeah.
There will be simulated sex. There will be 4 minutes, say, of, you know,
Intimacy on scene.
Yeah, or whatever.
Huh.
Like, you know, be able to break it down.
Yeah.
But what they will be able to do is be like, go watch that film. There is that one scene. I want it to be something like that. So they'll be able to give references.
Yeah.
Right? So what I do is I take all the references from the directors. So as an intimacy coordinator, the job role definition is you take the vision of the director, you ask the actors for their consent and their boundaries. You uphold the actors and or the performers' consent and boundaries. You choreograph a scene to visualize to realize the director's vision. That's essentially what an intimacy coordinator does.
Sure.
In its most basic sense. So it involves absorbing those conversations from the director, understanding what it is the director wants, requirement kya hai. Going up to the actor saying this is what we want to do, right? For which you have to then modify your vocabulary according to what the actors will understand.
And be comfortable.
With. So a lot of actors want it to be extremely clerical.
Clerical as in, give me examples.
For example, I will not say the word doggy style to some actor. Right? To that person, I will say person with a penis standing behind another person is going to perform simulated sex as though having penetrative sex on camera, so on and so forth. Right? So then you're going to really make it very clear.
Yeah, but I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was HBO who, after the Me Too movement in 2018, when they started with something called intimacy coordinators. I don't think it was there before that time.
Yeah, it wasn't. So HBO had this show called The Deuce, which had this actor called Emily Mead. Second season of The Deuce, the actor turned around and said, the scenes that I'm required to do, I need support. So the actor was aware of the fact that there's something called intimacy directors on stage. So she said, I need somebody. So then that person from stage, her name is Alicia Rhodes, the world's first ever intimacy coordinator, credit, went to her, a beautiful person. She was brought on by HBO for The Deuce. After using Alicia on The Deuce, HBO then eventually mandated that anything that is ever an HBO production must have an intimacy coordinator.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's incredible.
It is amazing.
Yeah. I think there have been multiple studios after that have gone on and created those mandates. But now SAG-AFTRA has done that for them in the US at least. So actually not just the US, Canada, UK and Australia. They've all got very strong guidelines around the usage of intimacy coordinators. So much like, and it hurts me to say this, but when you use an animal on, even if, like if there's a bird on your screen, or when you're using an animal like a stray dog, or there are a lot of people who have animal wranglers that they bring in different animals like a pet cat or like a dog,
sure,
or like Dil Dhadakne Do had a dog or whatever. Like all of these films that have animals, right? You have to take licenses to use animals because you have to pertain to the fact that there was no cruelty on set with these animals of any kind. But there is no mandate around making sure that you're preventing sexual harassment and on set for the people that are working there. And why I say preventing, because there is post-trauma support available, which was how India decided to mitigate the Me Too movement, which is also extremely interesting to deep dive into when you think about it. So while the West, what they did was they came up with the intimacy coordinator, and they came up with all of these other stopgaps around how in harassment, how do you work around harassment, if there is any harassment that occurs, what are you gonna do, so on and so forth. What India did was they created POSH committees.
Yeah.
So now there is a helpline or an email address that you get to go and write an email and put forward a complaint after the fact. Right? But there is absolutely nothing done before the fact.
Yeah. Which is so important to avoid this.
Yeah. So the point is, for me, it's prevention is better than cure.
Yeah.
Because you might turn around and say after the fact that we don't consider this as harassment. Or even if you do, and you've taken away the person who harassed the other person, their job you've taken away. Media has cancelled them, so on and so forth, right? But the person who's been harassed has to still go through therapy.
Yeah.
They have to still live with what happened to them.
Correct.
Right? There is no redemption from this, right? If I have been sexually harassed, it is a trauma that I will live with. My body will keep that score.
Yeah.
There is no amount of somebody else getting punished that is going to take away from that trauma. So what are we doing to make sure that, well, make sure is the wrong word because nobody can make sure, but what are we doing at least to try and create an environment where, where it is very hard for somebody to cross a line.
Yeah. That's where intimacy coordinators come into play.
But again, intimacy coordinators only come into play in that one sphere where there are these scenes that are coming.
Yeah.
So of course these are higher vulnerability scenes, so the risk in these scenes is much higher, and therefore you wanna talk about that, and you wanna make sure that in this situation as much prevention possible.
Yeah.
Right? But we haven't even done anything for the crew, and we haven't gotten to that bit yet. Because we haven't even gotten to the intimacy coordinator bit yet on a 100%
space.
And we usually as an industry look at our actors being the first people we do anything for.
Yeah.
So
This reminds me an incident, I think again 4-5 years back, Chitrangada had spoken about that once they were shooting for some intimate sequence on the set of Babu Moshai Bandukbaz, and I remember she had got uncomfortable with how the director was treating the whole sequence, and she was not comfortable with how it was being done. And have you seen something like this on a set? Have you seen it up close and personal?
Where an actor is uncomfortable with something that's been, oh yeah. it happens because people are not aware of boundaries. And they don't know how to respect them once they've been set without taking it upon their egos. When a person is setting a boundary, they're setting the boundary for themselves.
Yeah.
It is about them. It is not about you. That is the first thing. And also, as a culture, we don't believe in the fact that no is a positive word.
Yeah.
Right? No is taken extremely offensively.
Yeah.
In general. So, it's also then not said enough because you don't want to offend the person who's in front of you. And then you get uncomfortable. Or times when you say no, but the other person is just not listening.
Yeah.
So, it'll happen.
What happened on the set that you were referring to?
Oh, the set that I'm referring to actually... the female actor had a huge problem with the fact that the male actor had like a boys club with a couple of the other male actors, and they would crack jokes around the scenes of intimacy that were making the female actor extremely uncomfortable. The one that I'm talking about specifically. Actually, this is an international show. It's not even a show for India that I did. Oh. And in an international show, I did it for a show, Southeast Asian show. And it was so interesting for me to see that human beings are the same everywhere. And how much ever you try and explain something to them, they don't understand it. So these boys decided that they were just sharing texts and they were laughing at jokes, and then they would. There is this general term, it's usually, so my first AD on this one film that I worked on used to call all the scenes of intimacy wo pucchi wala scene. Right? That made one of the actors very uncomfortable.
Of course.
Like, that kind of stuff happens. And then if your male actor or like your male actor, female actor, it doesn't matter. But like if your co-actor is making it uncomfortable for you, then it gets another thing. I've actually had a situation where another actor was trying to make their co-actor feel comfortable, but their co-actor was going through a rough patch in their marriage. And so that was stuff that they were bringing on set. But of course, it's nobody's business to know that.
Yeah.
Right? So they were keeping their distance apart from when they were doing the scene. So the other actor got very offended by the fact that they were keeping their distance, and so they would come on much stronger during the scene. And when they would come on much stronger, it was just like a huge like play of trying to make sure that you want to make sure that the other actor doesn't feel offended.
Yeah.
But you also want to make sure that this actor is not getting triggered in any way. And in those moments, there's again, consent is so blurry, right? For an intimacy coordinator to in that moment stand with one red flag and say, we will not shoot the scene, I can't do it, right? Both the actors are agreeable to shoot the scene, they'll shoot the scene. The director wants to shoot it, the actors want to shoot it. So what becomes important in that moment is, it's not that black and white where I can just be like, no, don't do it.
Yeah.
I have to then be like, okay, I understand where this person's consent lies, and so I have to give them the support that they're going to need to be able to get through this.
How do you do that in this particular sequence?
I distracted them from having to be in the same space as each other. I would be like, come, let's go for a walk, and I would take the other person away. I would do stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's bystander intervention if you were to think about it in its academic term.
Yeah.
If for any kind of harassment or any kind of crossover of boundaries, there is something called bystander intervention, and there are different ways in which intimacy coordinators are trained in order to reduce the impact of harassment while it is happening in front of them.
Netflix Prime ये सब okay हो गए हैं. I think they are hiring more intimacy coordinators to do their job. But is the local producers also in the same line, or is it still tough to like put it in their head? Because today when you look at so much of stuff, especially on OTT, there's so much intimacy out there. So people would expect कि एक intimacy coordinator के पास बहुत काम आएगा, बहुत busy होएगा क्योंकि उसको जाके ये सब ठीक करने हैं. But I don't think that is happening. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. हमारे पास काम नहीं है. Okay. If I am to speak in complete honesty, the budgets are abysmal. number of days that one has to shoot in a month are not more than 7, which is very little for anybody.
Yeah.
And I'm saying 7 is a good month.
Acha.
7 is a good month. You're like, oh wow, 7 days of shoot. Like, I've made a lot of money in 7 days of shoot.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen. So the thing is, the Netflix, Amazon, Hotstar, Z5, all of the platforms that you can think of, they all run on a business system where they acquire content or sanction or greenlight content, but they hand it over to local productions.
Yeah.
So when it is handed over to the production, the entire crewing up, the entire choice of budget, the entire allotment of budget, the entire I would say the entire hold on what gets spent where in general and what is required and what isn't sits with the local production. So when you say that Netflix and Amazon are hiring, it's actually not them per se, although yes, there is of course there is support from them. Like if somebody wants to hire an intimacy coordinator, Netflix and Amazon will not say no.
Okay.
But they will not go out of their way to say you have to hire one. Because we see that as creatives, or we are seeing as a studio that there is intimacy on your script, so you must have an IC on set. That isn't there.
It's not like a mandate, even from these studios.
It's not even a strong guideline. Forget it being a mandate. I don't think it's even a strong guideline. It's not even the kind of thing where a studio is turning around and telling the local productions that, hey, this is something you need to do because we would like for our sets to have ICs.
Yeah.
Right? It's not there yet. We're working on it. Slowly but surely. Hopefully.
Yeah.
And maybe if somebody hears.
Yeah, which is why I was just thinking in my head right now, Aastha, that, which is why there's conversation. Sometimes, it is conversation like these that really make me feel that I'm doing work that will probably create one impact. Even if one producer sees this and says, no, this is something that needs to be adapted, it's a change.
Yeah, 100%. There are certain studios that have adopted intimacy coordinators. And I get to hear that they regularly call them. And not just me, other intimacy coordinators also. And by studios, I mean production houses, the bigger production houses, right? Like Dharma. If they have an intimacy scene, they will call an intimacy coordinator. Does not have to be me necessarily, but there will be somebody.
Sure.
They not just Dharma, there's Maddock, Dinesh Vijan's production.
Yes.
Oh my God. They will always call. Like I worked on 2 projects with Homie. I did G Karda as well.
Oh, achha.
So they've done I think since I started working with them, since then, anytime there has been intimacy, they will pick up the phone, they will call. And they will make sure that there is a budget for it. They will allot it. They're like, okay, if the writer is going to write it, if the actor has to perform it, the director wants to direct it, there should be an intimacy coordinator.
Yeah. But why I really feel, Aastha, that beyond the simulated sex, beyond the nudity, why this is also important, because say for example, there's a song called Choli ke piche kya hai? Or there's a song called Chhat pe soya tha behno hi main tanne samajh ke so gayi mujhko Rana ji maaf karna galti mare se ho gayi. These are risky lines. And it might be difficult for an actor to mouth these on the big screen. It's not very comfortable.
Yeah.
Probably at situations like this, an intimacy coordinator can come in between and probably
make it safer. Yeah.
I have a few more questions, but before that, I really want to move on to your kit. And I want to see the stuff that you really use to make sure that things don't go wrong on the set. So basically now you have the stuff that you use on the set, it's out there. Now let me know how you use them and how it protects the actors.
So my kit is much larger than this.
Yeah.
And it basically has 3 categories of things in it. Okay. One category is hygiene related. So razors, Listerine, toothbrush, Odomos, moisturizer, body oil, nail cutter, nail filer. Then I have one category which is modesty garments. So modesty garments are basically when we're shooting any kind of nudity, whether it's implied nudity or say full frontal nudity, semi-frontal nudity, side nudity, so on and so forth, actors are actually not naked on set. So there are very many ways in which we cover the actors in parts of their body that don't show on camera.
Sure.
So if I'm doing a full back naked for say a female actor's full back we want to see, then I will cover their breast tissue, their chest tissue. So then I'll use things like stuff like nipple pasties. So there are many different kinds. They come in cloth, they come in silicone. We have larger ones for more coverage, smaller ones for less coverage.
Yeah.
Really depends on how we're shooting the scene. Apart from nipple pasties, certain actors want a little more coverage than that.
Yeah.
So then I'll start using body tape. And so body tape, the way it works is, it's basically a roll of tape. And it's skin colored and it's adhesive. I can put it any part of the body as much as required for as much coverage. So I can basically cover somebody from neck all the way till their stomach completely in front and have their entire back visible on camera. It really depends on what is comfortable for the actor and how much they need in terms of coverage. And we kind of work from there. I use body tape also for when I'm doing below the waist coverage. Okay. So like say suppose I need to show somebody's bum on camera. So then I'll use body tape to make sure that I am attaching the C-thong. So a C-thong is basically so what we understand of a thong or a G-string as people call it, is that it has straps on both sides and then it has cloth in the middle. Yeah. Right? So the cloth goes between the legs and the straps are on the waist. Yeah. A C-thong is just cloth between the legs. Okay. Without the straps on the sides. So that way what I can get is I can get full nudity on, like full side nudity without somebody actually being naked at all. Then there is stuff where we have something called like a male thong. Now there are times when actors don't feel comfortable using adhesives on their body, or they're not comfortable because they feel like I'm not wearing something. There's a lot of psychological aspect to it, right? Coverage has a psychological aspect to it, which is why a lot of times body tape that we use, although we use skin tape a lot of times, we use colored tape a lot of times. Certain actors feel like if they're wearing a color rather than wearing skin, they feel more comfortable because they feel like they're wearing something.
Yeah, and anyway, it's not seen on the camera.
And as it is, the tape is not seen on camera. Usually what I will do is, even if it is that they put color, and then after that I'll border it with skin tape so that if there is a very slight, say, show on camera, it can be cleared in VFX.
Makes sense.
It gets merged in VFX, and that paint job is not very difficult to do. So we can work around it. Some actors want to wear things. So that's when I'll give them something like this. So now this is a male thong. Right? You would imagine it's really small. It does the job. It covers. Right? And then what goes on inside of this, because usually undergarments like this, the seamless ones, the ones that are skin colored, whatever, they come with such material that is very flimsy. It's not supported, right? So we use something called internal barriers for something like this. So I'll use cups with foam, and then I'll customize it. So I'll add, say, if you touch it, you'll be able to feel there is a
there's a cushion.
There's a cushion. There's a foam. Like easy, like I would say about 3mm, 4mm cushion between. You kind of add that in. So say suppose this is the thing, and then I'll stitch it. Here. Right?
It's giving the actor some comfort.
So it gives them a certain structure. It gives the garment some structure. So another one that I have is this. This is another version of the same thing. It's a crotch pouch of another kind. Right? So they're all different varieties. The idea is we give many varieties and then we just, whatever they feel comfortable. They're like, okay, give me this one. This feels comfy.
Makes sense.
Of course, each of them has a different level of cushioning. So then you decide how much barrier space or how much cushioning, how much structure you want to give. This is a barrier. Now, once it's done the job of making people wear modesty garments, the next bit or the next category of things that is there in my bag are barriers. Barriers basically is there so that there is no genital touch.
Yeah.
And there are two reasons for it. One, because you don't want to feel awkward.
Yeah.
Right? In general, it doesn't matter whether there is arousal, it doesn't matter if somebody has an erect penis, none of that is of any consequence. You just generally want to feel a little more comfortable, and the way to feel comfortable is to know that there's gap.
Yeah.
Right? And the second bit is, of course, if there is any kind of possible mishap of arousal. Right? So there's something called arousal non-concordance, which is again a technical term. But basically the idea is that there are a lot of times that people can get aroused and they don't know why their body is aroused, because they're not actually consenting to the situation. Or it's not like they're attracted to the person also.
Yeah.
It's just because the body has hit certain stimulus.
Yeah.
And so there is arousal. So it's involuntary. You want to safeguard actors from ever feeling like that involuntary mishap will happen, which will be extremely embarrassing for them.
Yeah.
And make the other person also uncomfortable, make them also uncomfortable, all of that stuff. So the academics behind it is that. So that is how you kind of use barriers. Also use barriers because no real sex acts. We don't do any real sex acts.
Of course.
So when you have a barrier, it's just like reinforced that everything is tucked away and kept aside, and there is no real sex act happening at any point. This is a barrier. This is actually, for your knowledge, a strapless bra.
Yeah, correct.
Right? It goes like this.
Yeah.
Okay. I use it as a barrier. The reason I do it is because everything that we get in the market, we have to use as jugaad.
Correct, obviously.
Because
I don't think
there isn't a brand that sells it, modesty garments. Maybe someday when I have some kind of investment, I'll think about it. Inshallah. But up until now, it hasn't. So what I do is, I use this, and because it has a great form, because it has this underwire that works perfectly, has great form to stake right under the stomach, and then to gives again based on the size of it, so it can give plenty of space to a person with a penis for their penis and scrotum and all of that material tissue. Then give them enough coverage by going over the bum over here, and then I can tape around it. So I can use this. Also it's soft.
Yeah.
Right? So over and above, say this, that they're wearing inside. So this would go inside. And then I would put this on top. So then I would give them enough
surety.
Cushioning.
Nothing is going to go wrong.
Nothing is moving. And also there is enough cushioning.
Yeah.
So now if this body is touching another person's body, there is so much cushioning between the two that there is, at no points there is going to be any touch or even the sense of genitals being felt on the body. While somebody like this, somebody with a penis is wearing something like this, somebody with a vagina or a vulva would be wearing something like this. It's a butt pad.
Yeah.
So say suppose we were doing a doggy style.
Yeah.
Right? So the person who is on their fours would need
A cushion.
support, cushioning on the back.
Yeah.
So that this is the kind of thing that I would use to give them internal support on the back.
Yeah.
So they could be wearing something in that, and because of what they're wearing, as it is, the other body is covering them.
Yeah.
So you can't tell that they're not wearing anything. And this is the kind of barrier that I would use for this kind of situation.
This one makes me ask you, you worked on Class.
Yeah.
Now there's this, and there's a lot of intimacy in this show.
Yeah.
I must say, very tastefully done.
Thank you.
And there's this one sequence where this character called Balli walks out of the washroom butt naked.
Yeah.
Tell me how difficult that scene is. And I remember when that scene is being shot, usually what people do is during such sequences, there are only 4 or 5 people involved.
It is a
He
lot of
comes out
children.
in the
Correct.
room and there are people around.
Yeah.
How did you shoot that sequence?
We covered the front with the same kind of coverage that we wanted. We had already spoken to the actor and taken consent for bare bum. and that was taken at the stage of casting. Also, Sivayal is a phenomenal actor.
Yeah.
The person who played Bali.
Yes.
Very confident in his body, very confident in his performance, extremely focused and very professional. He had a lot of intimacy.
Yes.
In the
a lot of it.
A lot of intimacy in the first season. Yeah, he has a lot of intimacy in the second season as well. Along with Koyal, Naina.
Yes.
Yeah. Sivayal, again, I spoke to him. He was a little bit nervous, as you would be. I mean, anybody would be. But then when he got into his character and had to shoot it, he was just like, okay, chalo, let's do this. And we went ahead and shot it. There were a lot of people on set, but he was so confident in his body that it made it easier. Also, if you see the way that it's been shot, his bum is actually only visible to the camera, not to the people. Yeah. And everything, while he's walking, all the people that you are seeing are all people that are in front of him, and the front was covered.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the class actors were comparatively newcomers, but then you go on and work with Deepika Padukone in Gehraiyaan. You're such an established superstar. Does your process change then of approaching a certain sequence or a certain sequence that involves intimacy?
Oh yeah. I was a fan, no? Also. No, but your approach changes because you're not talking to them as though they don't have any idea about how to shoot or what camera angles are like. But apart from that, it doesn't change. When you're talking to an actor that is an established actor, they understand what camera angles are, what is being shot, what is the story arc, what is the character arc. They're also at that stage where they are able to question, why is there a scene of intimacy? Is it needed for the story? Yeah. So on and so forth, right? Having said that, Deepika was a dream to work with. She is by far one of the most amazing actors who have done intimacy scenes with. While making sure everything is up to protocol, she would be very clear of making sure, like she told me, she was like, you make sure everyone is out of the room, you make sure it's a closed set. She would say those things to me. But when it came down to actually shooting the scenes, there wasn't apprehension. She was there. She was happy to give Shakun all the faith and support that she needed to give as a performer to her director. Yeah. In that moment, to be like, I understand that this is your vision and we're going to help make it come to life. So in that moment, she's not Deepika, she was Alicia, and she made it happen. She was like, okay, I understand why Alicia would do this, and so we'll do it. Yeah. So because she was so also self-assured. Yeah. Right? When you're at that stage and you've chosen to do a film like Gehraiyaan, you know what is coming. Yeah. It's not going to hit you out of nowhere, right? Yeah. So you're aware of what you're shooting, you're aware of what is coming to you. And she came with that confidence and she ruled. Was she willing for workshops? Oh yeah. In fact, she's the one that kind of brought up the idea of doing workshops.
Before shooting the sequence.
Yeah. Not just intimacy workshops. She brought up the idea of doing acting workshops also. She said, I would like to spend time with the actors before we go on set to shoot. Yeah. Because there is a power dynamic. She's a superstar. The other three actors were not superstars in that same right. Yeah. Again, actors, well-known actors, and very well-known actors. Siddharth did really well in Gully Boy and Inside Edge before that and stuff like that. So he was also a very well-known actor. But nobody's a Deepika Padukone. Yeah. And then you have to play her sister, her love interest. Yeah. That familial interaction to bring that calm, that composure, that bodily familiarity, that only comes from workshop space. And to be open to that workshop space, she had to be the one who was open to it. Everybody else would be like, yeah, okay, we'll do it if Deepika's asking. Yeah. But everyone else was also very excited to do it. So we actually did it. We did a lot of workshops. We did the intimacy workshops and the acting workshops part of the same week.
Sure. So when you're working on a film set, you're working on the producer's salary. Now, say an actor has done a scene and has found that some of her comfort has been violated. Now, in this sequence, and you're on the set, you've seen it, you're a witness to that. in a situation like this, the producer might say, let's brush it under the carpet. And the actor wants to raise his or her voice saying, this is something I'm not comfortable with. How do you deal with a situation like that?
See, if a producer turns around and says, I want to brush it under the carpet, then the producer is bringing on a huge risk to themselves. Because any actor can catch hold of any person in the media, and the production house can have havoc rain on them. Especially the moment that it does become something like this, it's the next headline on the next tabloid, and social media is going to just pick it up like this.
But before 2018, it hardly came out, na, Aastha?
Before 2018, actors didn't feel like they had a voice when it came to losing jobs. And also a lot of actors, a lot of performers felt like if they would come out and say something, that people would say they're victims, or like victim cards that they're playing. And there's a lot of nonsense also now that comes your way when you have to relive a certain incident. It is the same. It's like and what happens when people get raped? Then they asked 15 times, how did you get raped?
Yeah.
Or like if there was harassment, how do you think it was harassment? By what measure is it harassment? So on and so forth.
Correct. Difficult questions to answer for the victim.
But here's the thing. Now, in the world that we are in today, in our industry, even if the producer on that local production is saying, I want to brush it under the carpet, studios can't do it. So if your producer of your local production is brushing it under the carpet, you can go up to the Netflix or the Amazon and speak to them directly and be like, hey, this happened to me and I need you to address it. Your management can write to legal and have it addressed.
Yeah.
But I have to say, there are studios like the bigger studios again. Your Dharma, Yash Raj, Maddock, RSVP. They've all got HR systems, posh systems, harassment lines, no tolerance policies, all of that stuff in place. So if somebody does say something and choose to say something, they can.
Yeah. Touch wood for that.
Yeah, thank God for that. And then there is one more aspect to it. There is a legal aspect. If this person, actor, hopefully, and I'm saying this hopefully because I'll explain why. Hopefully, if this person is a woman, then there is a legal angle to it. Workplace Harassment Act for women. So you can go and call the police on them. You can't do that as a man.
Why?
In India, the law doesn't allow it. The law for sexual harassment is only for women. So it does not involve non-binary people, it does not involve trans people, and it does not involve men. As far as I'm aware, I could be wrong if there has been any update on the law in the maybe recent times. But as far as my knowledge goes, that is what it is. It is known as the Sexual Harassment Act for women in the workplace. Yeah. So, person that is a woman can file a complaint. Nobody else can. Man cannot file a complaint also
Or
on behalf.
From the LGBTQIA community.
The L can, the G can't.
Correct.
Yeah,
Because again, for women, you say, sure, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But
Anybody who identifies as a woman can't.
Yeah.
Anybody who is sex assigned at birth female can.
Technicality is there also. True. No, the reason I asked this question is also because is there a way to do something around this, to make something around this, to make sure that the IC is not biased at any point, because the
IC is not biased because the IC is the witness.
Correct.
Yeah.
But the IC is still being paid by the producer, so there's no pressure on the IC also.
No, nobody can pay you enough to not do your job.
Yeah. Sure. That makes sense. Nobody can pay you enough to not do your job well.
Yeah.
And ethically.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. And I don't want to work with that production house if a production house is not going to address a harassment situation. Right?
Yeah.
So it's not a function of will I get another job with them ever again. wouldn't work with them ever again because they don't understand the sanctity of my job.
More power.
So yeah, that's where I'm at. I feel like there needs to be a larger conversation, and I want to try and impact and hit at this culture in any way or form that I can.
And I hope we've been a party to that. I hope we take this forward, and I hope more and more people know this, be aware about it, and make sure it's important to have a safe working environment in any case. Thank you so much, Aastha. This was a lovely conversation. There are some days that I feel happy of the work that I'm doing. This is one of them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I am so grateful that you called me here, and there's no better platform to swear, and I'm so glad I spoke to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, like, share, subscribe, and don't forget to join us every Friday for the next episode of the Pinkvilla Podcast.